Hey everybody, welcome back to EasedEdge. You have now set up your statuses, hopefully. Again, that's probably something you will, or that will evolve with your company as you figure out the best way to do everything. But now that you've got a basic setup of your your statuses, the next thing to look at is your tasks. And that's what drives that job through this pipeline, through this process. And again, go to the settings gear, hop back into statuses, and what you're going to look at now is who needs to do what when a job is in a particular status. I'm going to run through a couple quick examples. I'm also going to show you what we do at our company, some examples of some tasks. Again, I don't count on following anybody else's procedure to the T because every company is unique. And this is something that, again, will evolve and change with your company as you figure out the best process and who needs to do what. A good example of a task is when a job gets put into the lead, basically gets entered into EasedEdge, it automatically goes into the lead status. What's the first thing that typically happens on a lead? The estimate needs to be created. And typically, you're going to have an account manager, whoever is handling that particular account, make the estimate. We'll get into assigning account managers a little later. You can also assign, if you have an estimating department, as long as you've set them up as a user, you can assign that estimate to a particular person or a particular department. In this case, we have it set to go to the account manager. And again, as soon as that job gets created and goes into that lead status, that task is automatically created by the software. Let's hop into a job here, and you can see in the job file, there's the task estimate, which is understood to mean create the estimate. This shows up, every task shows up on everybody's dashboard depending on who is signed in. So for instance, Bob McBart is the one that's signed in right now, and all the tasks that are assigned to Bob McBart show up on the dashboard. You can also sort by due date, assigned date, and who the task is assigned to. So if I want to look at what tasks are assigned to Emma Bryan or to a particular department, another person, I can see those particular tasks. So cool thing is the software generates the task, but it also shows up on the relevant person's, the relevant user's dashboard, and kind of controls what they do every day. They get a flow, when it's due, when it needs to be done, and they have a good idea of what they need to do next. Let's hop in and see how to create a task and talk a little bit about the purpose of these and the kind of the rationale, the thinking behind creating these tasks. So we looked at the task inside lead, which is create the proposal. Let's talk about when a job is won. A lot of people will have a task that says either update the estimate and get approval, or in a lot of people's cases, it's just get the approval signature. So once that approval signature's gotten, you have their approval, that job can go to the next step, which is typically working or some status that's similarly named. And at that point, it should be ready to schedule the template, right? Well, if a job gets won and moves to the next status, maybe that is the next thing I want to happen. So when it goes to working, I'm going to have that task go to my scheduling department or to a particular person, schedule the template. Once they check off on that task, you can either stay here in this status until it's templated, and sometimes some companies will even have their templater update the job to the next status once it's templated, or there can be another status that says templates scheduled. Let me show you on our software, kind of again, our flow. We have one template ready. This is where the scheduling department schedules the template. Once they've scheduled it, it moves over to template scheduled, and then it goes to template completed. It follows that flow. This is going to be based on how your company works, what your next task is. A lot of people have tasks that maybe other companies don't have if they have specific paperwork per job that needs to be filled out. You might create a task for an individual to get that paperwork done. Let's hop back over into the statuses then and actually create a task. Let's say that in fabrication, I'm going to send a task to my warehouse to release the material. That means they're going to pull the material, they're going to set it in the shop so it's ready to cut, and then they're going to check off on their task. The way to create a task is just to go to this little plus sign down here in the bottom right, name the task, assign it to, oh, sorry, this is something else. I'll get into that. Assign it to the account manager or to a particular individual or department, and put in the due date. So is it due the same day? Is it due within 2 days? Is it due within a week? Assign the due date. And then you have this option here to check off this box. And again, this is kind of a control thing. Do you want to make sure the tasks are done before the job can move to the next status? This is typically a good idea, but when you're starting out and you're figuring out these processes, it's usually a good idea to leave this box unchecked until you have a really good system figured out. Another cool feature in here is you can make tasks dependent on other tasks being completed. So for instance, for this status, I have, this is the fabrication status, I have the task for the warehouse to release the material. The next task in here, if you want to get really granular, and you want to break out every stage of the process, the next task is really for the material to be cut. So let's say I'm going to make that task. Cut the job. You can, say whatever you want, however you want to describe it. I'm going to assign it to, in our case, at our company, we have it assigned to a Sabre user. We use a Park Sabre, and that user is always open on the Sabre computer. That's the machine that cuts the job. So I'm going to assign it to a particular individual, and then I'm going to put the due date same day, because as soon as that material's pulled, I want it to get cut. Here's the thing though, they can't cut this job until that material's pulled from the warehouse. So releasing the material needs to take place before this task is generated. So I'm going to assign this task when release material task is completed. Now when I save that, I've got another task, cut the job, and you can see by the arrow here that it's assigned upon the completion of release material. So if I take a job, I'm going to jump into my home, I'm going to take a job that is in programming and move it to fabrication. The way you do that is go into the job file, select the statuses, hit fabrication, and then I'm going to update the status. Now, this job is in fabrication and it automatically generated a couple tasks. These are kind of bogus tasks that we just from dinking around with the software, this demo version. But here's my main task, release the material. When the warehouse releases the material and they check off on the task, boom, creates the next task to cut the job. Then at our company, we have another task that's dependent on this one to polish the job. So hopefully you get the idea. Your tasks create the flow, and there are multiple scenarios where you will have tasks that are dependent on other tasks. Cut job happens after material is released. So the idea, go to those statuses and figure out who needs to do what inside of each status in order that that job can get moved along in the process. If a job is in fabrication, all those tasks need to be done so that it can get moved to the next status. Typically after fabrication, your next status would be something like installation ready. And then when it gets moved to that installation ready, it alerts. You can have a task that basically alerts the office that the fabrication is complete, and they can reconfirm the install date. So hopefully you get the idea. This is extremely important. The tasks are what pushes that job through the process, and also gives all your people the knowledge to know what to do and when to do it. See you on the next video.